live streams. It always seemed like a hell of a commitment sitting down and watching somebody in real time, not being able to turn my focus away lest I miss something exciting. They always seem to stretch on for hours, too. Who has time to watch all that? Well, I guess if somebody has time to stream it, somebody has time to watch. Anyway, that doesn't make a difference to me. I don't have time to sit around watching a 4-hour stream. I liked this guy's videos, though. That's why I decided to take a look. I had no intention of sticking around for the whole thing, of course. I popped in a few minutes after it started to see what was going on. The title advertised some new game he was planning on sharing, but he hadn't started yet. I had stuff to do, and I didn't feel like sitting and waiting while he dicked around, so I closed out. I'd peek in again later to see if anything interesting was going on. The next time I opened the stream, he was dead. It hadn't been more than 20 minutes, but there he was, hunched over, face down on the desk, lifeless. The chat was frantic. I could barely read the messages as they sped by, but I gathered that he'd been like that for a while now. Chilled and bewildered, I closed the stream again. I didn't know what to make of it. What do you do? What can you do? Unsettled, with a vague feeling of responsibility for the situation that I couldn't do a damn thing about, I went on with my chores. I carried on with my day, feeling disoriented and unable to get the image of the dead gamer out of my mind. What the hell could have happened? As I mindlessly scrubbed away at the pan that had been soaking in the sink since last night, I wondered if the stream was still going. I wondered if he lived alone. How long would it go? Until somebody found him. Until his equipment stopped working. Hours, days. Would he decompose on the internet for all to see? Would people watch? Unable to stop thinking about it, I gave in to curiosity and tuned back in. There was a woman in the frame now, sniffling wetly and speaking softly to somebody just out of the shot. The dead man remained still in his place. I gathered that she was his wife, and that whoever was in the room with her, aside from the corpse, was some sort of first responder. That was about all I could gather. The conversation was nearly inaudible. A sudden wave of disgust came over me. I had no business watching this. A complete stranger's grief and horror at the loss of her husband, the undignified slump of a man who could no longer present himself, vague murmurs of their private life. I quickly exited the window and shut my laptop. I hadn't bothered to look and see if anybody else was still watching, but I didn't have to. There was no doubt that somebody was. Probably a bunch of people. I couldn't blame them. It was morbid, certainly, and invasive beyond words, but who wouldn't be curious? Interested, even. As a matter of fact, I was curious. I was interested. I lasted a while longer, but the pull grew too strong to resist. Once again, with a hesitant hand, I reopened my computer. There were a number of people in the room now. Police, EMTs, what have you. Most of them were just milling about, but 2 were examining the corpse. Christ, didn't they realize they were live? Could nobody see the camera? Wouldn't the wife have known he'd be streaming? I nearly closed my computer again, disturbed by the unintentional broadcast of such a private moment, but something caught my attention. I wish it hadn't. One man was knelt beside the body, poking and prodding and dictating notes for another to jot down on his pad. The examiner began feeling around the back of the dead gamer's neck, and as he did, the skin and meat began sloughing off in wet chunks, sliding away from the tendons and leaving clean bone behind. Nobody in the room seemed particularly alarmed by this, but I was dumbfounded. He'd only been dead a few hours, if that long. What the hell could make a person rot like that? I watched as the examiner continued maneuvering the body around. In spite of his careful movements, the corpse continued to come apart, flesh sliding off like unset jello, skin opening up like wet paper to reveal caverns of pus. I couldn't see the wife, but she was still in the room. I could hear her crying. It was a funeral sort of crying, soft and subdued, not the horrified shrieks I'd expect of somebody watching her husband rapidly decompose into a pile of chum. But then nobody seemed all that horrified. At this point, I was invested. I turned up my volume, listening closely, hoping to pick out something that might explain the gruesome display, but with no success. The conversation was hushed, sounding almost as though it were coming from another room, and while I could make out a fragment of a word here and there, the rest was unintelligible. How that was possible was beyond me. The dead man had a fantastic microphone, and the sound had been fine at the start of the stream. As a matter of fact, even now I could hear the sound of birds chirping and cars passing by. Not outside my house, but his. Dogs barking in the distance, the footsteps of a jogger fading in and away. The background noise was perfectly clear. The chatter taking place right in that very room, however, was muffled ambient noise. The impromptu autopsy taking place all over the living room floor was nauseating to watch, but I didn't have to endure it much longer. The stream ended without warning. Maybe his computer died or somebody knocked a connection loose, who knows. I felt a sense of relief in knowing I couldn't peek back in again, but I also felt thoroughly shaken. What the hell? What the hell had just happened? I couldn't make sense of it, and I suppose I'd make myself nuts if I tried. I closed my computer. I had a feeling I wouldn't open it again for some time. I remained there for a moment, staring blankly at the wall. Then, with nothing better to do, I pulled myself up and got back to washing the dishes. The next one is not from the Dream Project. This is one from what I hope will continue to be another group of stories, kind of themed around like nighttime fears and stuff. So, this one's called The Finger. I haven't come up with a better title for it yet. Carol had just passed the elusive threshold of comfort and sleepiness, that rare point where one lays still and falling asleep finally seems like a possibility, when a scratching at the door halted her slow descent into unconsciousness. She sighed. It wasn't an unfamiliar sound. She knew exactly what it was. When it kept going on for a few minutes, though, she realized she'd have to get up and chase the cat away if she wanted any hope of a full 8 hours. She lay there for a moment, hanging on to the comfort of her bed, then reluctantly shoved the covers off and dragged herself up. She didn't bother turning on the light. The moon shone enough through the window to guide her across the small room, but when she reached the door, she froze. Instead of a little black paw reaching under the gap of the old door, there was a long white finger. Carol held back a scream, staring in horror at the finger. It clawed and picked at the bottom of the door like the spindly leg of a trapped spider, and while she couldn't see what it was attached to, a heavy shadow at the edge of the gap suggested a head pressed right up against the bottom of the door. She looked down at her feet, suddenly excruciatingly aware of herself. Could it see her? She wanted to pull back to bed, but she didn't dare move. The cadaverous finger picked relentlessly at the door, and the longer she watched it, the more certain she felt that she would scream. She couldn't stand anymore. She took a silent breath, as silent as she could manage, and took a gazelle's leap away from the door, bounding back into the safety of her bed and burying herself deep under the covers. She lay there, eyes shut tight, holding the blanket over her head like a shield, trying in vain to block out the scratching of the finger. It occurred to her that whatever the finger was attached to might have been capable of just reaching up and grabbing the doorknob, and the thought made her blood run cold. An instinct shot through her to run back and lock the door, but if she did that, it would definitely know she was there, as if it didn't already. She couldn't lock the door. With her phone safely downstairs as part of her attempt to minimize bedtime distractions, she couldn't call for help. All she could do was lay and listen to the finger. Scratching, tapping, scraping, here and there a deep, cracking, picking sound as though it were digging straight through the wood. It went on for what felt like hours, though she was too afraid to peek at her alarm clock to confirm the estimate. Finally, after several long eternities, the sound stopped, and the room was filled with a heavy silence. Carol didn't feel relieved, though. She felt more on edge than ever. She listened closely, searching for any sort of presence in the house to discern where the finger, and whatever it was connected to, had gone. The soft, almost undetectable sound she finally managed to pick out shot a chill through her body like deadly electricity. It was in the room with her. Carol lay still, silently pleading for it to go away, but she needed to look. She needed to see what was there. in a dim patch of moonlight. A long, bruisey white arm snaked slowly across the floor, guided with blind determination by that awful prodding finger. She shut the gap quickly and held still as a statue, desperately hoping it would be unable to find her. Listening to the soft but nauseating rustle of waxy skin moving over the carpet, she could sense it crawling around the room, the finger tapping and waving like a grotesque antenna for another long eternity, and she thought she could hear it coming closer. Something shifted the covers, and before she could process what was happening, she felt an ice-cold corpse's touch tapping at her ankle. Okay, that's my 2 stories for the day. Hope you enjoyed them. Thank you for listening if you made it this far. I don't know how many more of these I'll be able to make because a lot of the ones that are left are kind of like my